The waiting room TV had been off until it turned on by itself, and for exactly 30 seconds it showed a single verse. No channel, no sound, just the song. Emily thought she was imagining it, but the number glowed in the corner of the screen, white letters on a black background, as if it had been written just for her. And maybe it had. The hospital was silent that morning, as if even the pain in the hallways had paused to be still. The wall clock read 7:14, but time felt frozen. Emily held in her hands what was left of a faith she wasn't sure she still had, a keychain, an old promise, and a prayer she no longer knew how to say. Her son, Noah, was upstairs. Tests, machines, suspicions, no diagnosis, but too many fears. And in those minutes, when the entire world seemed suspended, she just looked at the ceiling and whispered without a sound, "If you still speak, speak to me." But quickly, "I'm breaking." She didn't expect an answer, at least not so immediate, not so clear, not so impossible. But the answer was coming, not through words, not through doctors, not through human promises. It would come through something that shouldn't have happened, and yet it did. Because when it seems like faith has gone, sometimes that's exactly when God starts to return. If you've ever lived through a silence like this, or if you know someone waiting for a miracle, write their name here. Let's turn this video into a waiting room where God still shows up. The first time Emily noticed the empty chair was after 3 hours of waiting. She didn't know if someone had sat there before, if the seat was reserved, or if it was just an irrelevant detail. But for some reason, her eyes kept returning to it. The beige armchair, worn at the edges, with a small tear in the left armrest, seemed to call her, as if it were waiting for someone or something. The hospital was in Denver, a cold place at that time of year. Too many people in the halls, soft voices, tired eyes, and she had been sitting there since dawn, trying to find some comfort in the weak warmth of reheated coffee. Her son Noah, 12 years old, was on the second floor. Tests had been done overnight, and the doctors had scheduled a meeting for that morning. Words like tumor, anomaly, an inconclusive image echoed in her head like loose stones in a valley of despair. Emily never saw herself as a woman of unshakable faith. She had yelled at God more than once. She had gone weeks without praying, but that morning, what hurt wasn't doubt. It was absence. Absence of answers, of control, of ground beneath her feet. Her world had narrowed down to a cold room and a double door no one dared walk through. In her bag, there was an old photo of Noah as a baby and a keychain he had made at school that read, "You're my hero." She held it like a relic. It was the last thing standing between her and collapse. People came and went, nurses, receptionists, other mothers, but no one sat next to her. The empty seat grew more symbolic by the minute, as if it wasn't reserved for someone, but for something. Emily closed her eyes for a few seconds, took a deep breath. She remembered a moment, years ago, when Noah was still a child, and he once asked whether God lived in the sky or inside people's bellies. She had answered, without much thought, "Depends on where it hurts more." And that day, it hurt everywhere. An elderly lady crossed the room, coughing softly. A father held a sleeping child. The TV in the corner of the wall remained off. The ambient sound felt made entirely of sighs. Emily rested her face in her hands. She wanted to cry, but didn't want to look weak. She wanted to pray, but didn't know what to say. The weight of that moment was so dense that any word would have felt too small. "Talk to me, God," she thought, but it wasn't a plea. It was almost a final demand. Time moved on. People changed seats. The temperature seemed colder than before, and still, the chair beside her stayed empty. A soft noise made her open her eyes. Her bag had slipped from her lap and fallen to the floor. As she bent down to pick it up, she noticed something odd. The keychain with the words, "You're my hero," had detached. It was under the chair next to hers, as if something had pulled it. She reached out, picked it up, and instinctively looked at the empty seat. And in that exact moment, something shifted in her chest. There was no light, no sound, no vision, but she felt it. She felt like that place wasn't empty anymore. As if, for a second, someone invisible had sat there to wait with her. But it was just a feeling, right? Emily looked around. No one seemed to notice anything. The nurse at the desk was filling out paperwork. The receptionist typed with headphones in. The father with the sleeping child was now talking on the phone. Everything was the same, except for her, because there was a stirring in her chest, a subtle vibration. something between fear and relief, like when you hear a song and don't know where it's coming from, but you feel like it was written just for you. She squeezed the keychain in her hand. Then, in a nearly automatic gesture, she looked up at the TV mounted high on the wall. Still off, but she knew, at some point, that screen would have something to say. Her stomach turned, her chest tightened, and for the first time that day, she whispered something real. Not a question, not a cry, just a simple phrase. Small, but when spoken in truth, it moves heaven itself. Show me, God, if you're still here. But no one expected what would happen next. Emily kept her eyes fixed on the television, as if waiting for a sign. But there was no remote nearby, no visible button, no sign it even worked. It looked like it was just there to decorate the wall, or maybe to wait for the right moment. She leaned back in the chair, trying to convince herself that this was just stress talking louder than reason. But the air felt different, like someone had opened an invisible window in the room. Something inside her began to stir. It wasn't hope, it was expectation, and maybe the two were closer than she remembered. Emily glanced around. The receptionist was gone. The nurse was talking to a man in a lab coat at the entrance. For a few seconds, the room was just her and an elderly man wearing large glasses and a plaid shirt. He looked half asleep, but suddenly opened his eyes and smiled, a kind smile, familiar, as if he knew exactly what she was feeling. She gave him a shy smile in return, then looked back at the TV, and then, without warning, without anyone touching anything, it turned on. The screen lit up with a bright flash, black background, white letters, no image, no sound, just a Bible verse. Psalm 32:2, Lord my God, I called to you for help, and you healed me. Emily froze, her breath caught, her eyes locked on those words. It was a prayer. It was a response. It was the echo of what she had whispered in silence just minutes before. Her heart raced. Her hands trembled. The verse remained on the screen for 10 more seconds, and then the TV shut off on its own. She looked around. No reaction. The old man had closed his eyes again. No one else seemed to have noticed. That moment had been just for her. Emily placed a hand on her chest. Her heart still pounded. Her mind said, coincidence, but something deeper said, presence. This can't be real, she whispered, as if trying to convince herself. But it was. It had happened. She looked for the elderly man again. He was still in the same spot. She stood up, wanting to ask, to confirm he had seen it. But after taking 2 steps toward him, the chair was empty. No one was there. The man had vanished. Emily looked around, confused, walked over to the water fountain, tried to make sense of it. No doors had opened, no side holes. It was as if he had simply disappeared. She walked back to her seat, sat down slowly, her heart thudding in her throat. That's when she noticed something strange. On the floor, between the legs of the empty armchair, there was a crumpled piece of paper. Part of it seemed stuck to the lower side of the chair, as if it had been there for a long time. Emily bent down, pulled it out carefully, and unfolded it. It was an old envelope, stained with coffee, its edges worn, and the handwriting shaky, as if written by someone elderly. No recipient, no sender, but inside there was a note. If you found this, it's because you still believe. I left this psalm here for someone. It healed me, and now it's yours. And at the bottom of the note, in large letters, Psalm 30. She brought a hand to her mouth. Tears began to fall effortlessly. The same psalm that had just appeared on the TV. The same phrase, the same answer. She didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or pray. It all felt unreal, like a dream, but the paper was real. The smell was real. The chills on her skin were more real than anything she had lived through that morning. Emily clutched the note to her chest, as if protecting a piece of heaven. The words she had only thought in silence had echoed back, and that echo had form, had handwriting, had an address. It was there, under a chair, in the middle of a hospital. At the exact moment she had thought about giving up, she leaned back, closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, she prayed out loud. I heard you, God. I saw it. I don't know what's going to happen with Noah, but thank you for not leaving me alone today. And it was in that moment that everything began to change. She ran her fingers over the paper, as if she could feel the skin of the one who had written it. It was fragile. The edges were starting to crumble under her touch, and yet the words were perfectly intact. as if time itself had spared that message so it could arrive. Right here, right now. Emily folded the note carefully, the way someone might wrap something sacred. She tucked it into her purse, between hospital documents and the baby photo of Noah. But the psalm, she kept repeating it silently, verse by verse, even without remembering all the words, even without knowing the rest. That short phrase had pierced through the heaviness of the day. I called to you for help, and you healed me. She didn't know if it was a promise, a warning, or just a coincidence made sacred by desperation. But one thing was undeniable. A strange peace had settled in her chest, as if something whispered, just breathe. You are not alone. Right then, her phone buzzed. A message from upstairs. Mrs. Miller, please proceed to exam room 5. The doctor will see you now. She stood up slowly, still testing the ground beneath her as if reality might shift again. The waiting room looked the same as before, as if nothing had happened. But inside, everything was already different. As she approached the door, she noticed something odd. The TV, now off again, was reflecting her image like a mirror. And for a second, she thought she saw another figure standing behind her, like a shadow following her. But when she turned around, nothing, just the empty hallway and the soft sound of wheels rolling away on a hospital stretcher. She walked the corridor in silence. Each step felt heavier than the last. But now, something new filled her. Expectation. Before, she walked in fear. Now, she walked with cautious hope, like someone who had received a love letter with no return address, but recognized the handwriting. She reached the door to room 5. Emily did something she hadn't done in weeks. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She remembered the psalm, not like a charm, but like a secret code she alone had been given. The doctor, Dr. Patterson, was a middle-aged man with a serious gaze and steady posture. He nodded politely, asked her to sit, and opened the folder containing the results. Mrs. Miller, we ran a new set of tests on your son. When comparing them to the earlier ones, we noticed he paused. Some inconsistencies. Emily's stomach churned. Inconsistencies. Yes, the first scans showed a mass in the abdominal area, something that looked like a tumor. But today's images, there's nothing there. Emily felt her palms go cold. What does that mean? The doctor closed the folder slowly. It means either the earlier scan was incorrect, or there's been a complete regression, which, to be honest, is something medicine can't fully explain at this moment. She didn't speak, just nodded slowly, trying to absorb what that meant. He continued, the important thing is that Noah is well. He'll be discharged later today. But there's something else that caught my attention. Emily looked at him, puzzled. What is it? Dr. Patterson pulled a slip of paper from the bottom of the folder. When Noah was admitted, during intake, he was wearing a fabric bracelet. We had to remove it for the tests, and stitched into it was a word, one that's not common for a child to wear. He handed her the paper. In the center, embroidered in blue thread, it read, Psalm 30. Emily didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or collapse. He had stitched that himself. We're not sure. We asked, and he said he got it at school. But he didn't say from whom. She stood up. Her thoughts spun like two worlds crashing into each other. The TV, the note, the bracelet, the psalm. Everything pointed to the same place. She left the room without knowing exactly where to go, but her feet carried her back to the waiting area as if something still needed to be finished. When she got there, she saw that the chair she had sat in earlier was still empty, exactly as before. She walked over, sat again, and without thinking, reached into her purse. The note was still there. She pulled it out. Read it again. If you found this, it's because you still believe. She looked around, and as if answering the paper itself, she whispered, I believe now. But what she didn't know yet was that this story hadn't started with her, and the name signed at the bottom of the note held a greater secret. The drive back home was quieter than she expected. Emily kept her hands steady on the wheel, but her thoughts ricocheted off the walls of her mind like birds trapped inside a chapel. Noah slept in the back seat, his breathing calm, his face peaceful, as if he had never gone through days of fear, tests, and frightening medical theories. But Emily knew something had happened, something beyond logic, beyond medicine, and that something had a name, a number, a psalm hidden like a fingerprint across everything surrounding them. Once home, she didn't turn on the TV, didn't answer calls, didn't open social media. She simply tucked her son into bed and watched him for a few silent minutes. Noah turned onto his side, pulling the blanket up with a gentle tug. He slept deeply, as if he had already won the war, before even knowing he'd been fighting one. It was only after a quick shower, a warm cup of tea, and sitting on the edge of her own bed that Emily remembered the wall. 2 weeks earlier, she had done a small renovation in Noah's room. New paint, rearranged furniture. While scraping off the old paint, she had noticed a faint marking on the side wall, something written in pencil, barely visible. In the rush of the day, she had painted over it and forgotten. But now, that memory returned like a whisper, and that whisper needed to be heard. She grabbed a flashlight, walked quietly downstairs, entered the dark room, and closed the door behind her. She turned on her phone's flashlight and pointed it toward the wall beside her son's bed. The pale paint reflected the beam, but there was something there, something beneath the surface. With her heart racing, Emily picked up a damp sponge and gently scrubbed. Slowly, faint lines began to reappear. Fragile letters, trembling handwriting, as if written by an elderly hand. And then, the verse emerged. Lord my God, I called to you for help, and you healed me. Psalm 32:2. She stepped back. The air in the room felt heavier, thicker. That psalm had already been there, before the diagnosis, before the television, before the note. Emily brought her hand to her mouth. The floor felt like it was tilting beneath her, like everything she thought she knew was about to be turned upside down. Who had written that? When? Why? Then she remembered something she had completely forgotten. The house she lived in wasn't new. She had bought it less than 2 years ago from a widowed woman who had moved out of state. A modest house, but warm. At the time of the sale, someone mentioned that another person had lived there before the widow, but the full history had never been clear. Emily walked to the laundry room closet, where she kept a box of old documents about the house, purchase records, utility bills, floor plans. She dug through it until she found a smaller envelope filled with local newspaper clippings, a few old letters. Among them, a folded page titled Tribute to a Beloved Community Patient. The article was about a woman named Helen Dawson, a local resident, volunteered at the infirmary, known for writing notes with Bible verses and leaving them in places where she believed someone might need faith. Emily froze. The name, Helen. The note at the hospital, the handwriting, the song. She rushed to her purse, pulled out the note, compared it with the photo from the article. The signature, though faint, matched in form. Helen had lived there. In that room, on that wall. Emily sat down on the floor. It was too much to process. The note at the hospital, the TV turning on by itself, the bracelet Noah wore, the writing on the wall, the name in the newspaper. Everything pointed to the same source, the same echo. But the question still burned. Why? Why that song? Why Noah? Why now? She closed her eyes. The house was quiet. Only the faint sound of wind outside and Noah's gentle breathing upstairs. And then she remembered what the doctor had said. This improvement has no medical explanation. Maybe it had a spiritual one. She pulled her mother's old Bible off the bookshelf, a worn-out edition, its pages soft with time. She flipped carefully to Psalm 30 and read it, slowly, verse by verse. And when she reached the end, a chill washed over her entire body. You turned my wailing into dancing. You removed my sackcloth and clothed me with joy. Emily began to cry, not out of fear, not from despair, but from a kind of gratitude that words can't quite carry. It was as if Helen had left behind an invisible map just for her, a path from pain to healing, from the end to a new beginning. And without realizing it, Emily had followed every step of that path. But the story still held more, because Helen's name would appear again, and this time with something no one expected to find. The next morning, Emily woke up before sunrise, not because of insomnia, not out of anxiety, but because something inside her felt lit, like a lamp left glowing deep in her chest. She walked quietly downstairs, making coffee, without a sound, careful not to wake Noah. Her movements were mechanical, but her heart wasn't. Her heart pulsed like someone carrying a secret too big to hold alone. That very day, she had another appointment scheduled with Dr. Patterson. She didn't expect bad news, but she also didn't know if she was ready to hear what might come, because deep down, there was still a tension building. What if all of this, the note, the song, the television, the bracelet, the wall, was just a string of perfectly timed coincidences? Emily knew it wasn't. but her mind, conditioned by years of cold reality, still tested faith like someone checking a bridge for cracks before crossing. Back in the waiting room, hours later, she sat again in the same chair at the hospital, the one that had remained empty, and she noticed it was occupied now. A younger woman, holding a baby, sat reading a book of Psalms in silence. Emily smiled. It felt like a signal from the universe, or from God. Maybe empty chairs are never truly empty. Maybe everything has its turn, a sacred rotation of hope. The doctor called her in. Room 5 again. "Mrs. Miller, thank you for coming back. I want to show you something," he said, handing her to X-rays. Emily looked at the images, but couldn't interpret what she was seeing. "This one is from 2 days ago. This, the most recent. Look at the markers." He pointed to shaded regions, faint lines indicating parts of Noah's body. "What I see here is remarkable, not just because the previous mass is gone, but because the tissue appears clear. It's as if it never existed." Emily's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "Exactly that. The earlier report showed a cellular mass that needed further investigation, but this new scan shows a healthy, normal structure. No traces, no remnants, no known medical explanation." She raised her hand to her forehead. "So, it was nothing." The doctor hesitated. "That's what's strange. The first scan clearly showed something. I saw it myself. That's why we moved urgently. But now, it hasn't just disappeared. It's as if it was never there. Like," he searched for the words, "like something had been rewritten inside him." Emily closed her eyes. "Rewritten." The word echoed through her mind, like someone had torn up an old sentence and written a new one over it. She stood. "Dr. Patterson, do you believe in healing?" He furrowed his brow. "In what sense?" "In the most literal way. Like God answered a prayer." He was silent for a few seconds. "I believe in things medicine can't explain, and I respect things no textbook ever taught me. If you believe something greater was at work here, then maybe it was." Emily thanked him, shook his hand, and left the room with tears in her eyes, not from doubt, but from certainty. At the exit, the receptionist handed her an envelope, a document from intake. "It's under your name, but it arrived today." She opened it. Inside was a copy of Noah's personal items collected during check-in. The bracelet was there, and next to it, a folded piece of paper. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. It was a sheet of plain white paper, seemingly printed, but on the back, written by hand, in small, steady letters, "You were healed before you even asked, because God answers before the question." She didn't recognize the handwriting, and there was no signature, but she knew something or someone was stitching everything together. Back in the car, holding the envelope in her lap, Emily spoke out loud. "How is this possible? How was everything already there?" And then, she understood. It wasn't the prayer that brought the miracle. It was the miracle that had drawn the prayer. Emily drove home in silence. The road seemed clearer, the sky bluer, as if the world was trying to match what she now carried inside. Noah ran to his room, laughing at something he saw on his phone. For a moment, she stood quietly in the doorway, just watching her son breathing, alive, whole. She walked in, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at the wall. The psalm was still there, now outlined more clearly, as if time itself had insisted on making it visible. And she read it once more. "You healed me." But now, the meaning was different. It wasn't just about her son. It was about her too. Something inside her had been restored: faith, sensitivity, the certainty that God's silence is never absence. Sometimes, it's strategy. Before the day could end, the phone rang. "Mrs. Miller, this is the head nurse from Ward 2. Your name appeared on an old donation form. Did you know a patient named Helen Dawson?" Emily froze. "I'm sorry, who?" "Helen Dawson. She used to leave notes with psalms around the hospital. One of them was found today, with your name handwritten on it." "I'm sorry. Written where?" "On the back of the envelope." Emily pulled out the note she had kept. She turned it over. There it was. To Emily. Psalm 30. But what that woman had written wasn't just a goodbye. It was a map, and the next step on that path was still to be revealed. Emily didn't answer immediately. She held the phone to her ear, eyes fixed on the envelope in her hand. The name was there, simple, discreet, handwritten, to Emily. Psalm 30. The nurse's voice continued on the line. "Would you like to come in? We can show you the record and the origin of the note. It's at the reception of the geriatric wing." Emily nodded, not sure whether she was responding with words or just her breath. It all seemed too impossible to ignore. She hung up, slipped on her shoes, and picked up her car keys with a ritualistic slowness, like someone walking toward an altar dot at the hospital entrance. The day felt grayer than usual, but it wasn't sadness. It was silence, a silence that seemed to hold something sacred. The geriatric ward was in the adjacent building, beside the rehabilitation center. Emily had never been there before. The halls were wider, dimmer. Bible verses hung in framed pictures on the walls, and an old bookshelf sat in a corner of the reception area. A gray-haired nurse approached her. Her badge read, "Margaret, are you Emily Miller?" "Yes, I am. Come with me." She led Emily into a small room where a cardboard box rested on a table. Inside were letters, trinkets, and envelopes. Margaret pulled one out gently, handling it like a sacred object. Helen was a patient here. She lived with us during her final months. She suffered from a degenerative disease, but her mind stayed sharper than any doctor's. Emily sat quietly. Margaret continued. She used to write psalms on scraps of paper and leave them in random places, sometimes in the laundry room, other times under pillows, once even in a drawer at the front desk. Never the same verse, never for the same person. She said God gave the addresses, and that all she did was obey. Emily held the note. This one. Did she write it? Yes, that's her handwriting. But how did she write my name? Margaret made a gesture of gentle mystery. That's what we never understood. The name Emily appeared on more than one note, and the strangest part is they were found in different places. Weeks after her passing, Emily took a deep breath. How many? 3, and all 3 mentioned Psalm 30. Margaret handed her another paper, yellowed with time. At the bottom, in trembling letters, it read, "Emily, God will heal you before you pray." She swallowed hard. How could she have known? Margaret smiled softly. She said some messages don't come from us. They only pass through us. Helen didn't write out of whim. She wrote out of mission. Emily looked at the notes, the dates, the handwriting. Each letter felt loaded with a purpose she couldn't fully grasp yet. "May I see the room she stayed in?" Margaret nodded. They walked down the corridor to a door slightly ajar. On a silver plaque, Room 214. Upon entering, Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The room was simple: one bed, a chair by the window, a small shelf with a few books. But something lingered, a faint scent in the air, somewhere between lavender and old paper. She walked to the window. On the sill, an open Bible rested, as if someone had left in a hurry and intended to return. Emily leaned closer. The breeze stirred the pages. She looked down, and there, underlined in soft ink, was the passage, Psalm 30. She smiled through tears. Of course, inside the Bible, there was one more note, this one folded like a letter. Emily opened it carefully. The handwriting was firmer, more recent. "If you've made it this far, it means you survived the silence. And if you survived the silence, you're ready to hear the answer. This psalm healed me from the soul outward. Now, may it heal you. It doesn't matter where your pain is. It's not invisible to God. The weeping will end, I promise." Emily read it like someone hearing a song written exactly for their life. She stayed there a few more minutes, sitting in the armchair, staring at the empty bed, imagining Helen, weeks earlier, writing with tired hands. But a living faith, that woman she never met, had prayed for her before everything even began. And now, something needed to be done. Back at the reception desk, Emily requested copies of the notes. She thanked the nurse, and before leaving, she left an envelope behind. Inside, a psalm handwritten, "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." She didn't sign it. She simply placed the paper on the bookshelf among the old books, because maybe this was the new mission. But what she didn't know yet was that that same psalm would soon be read out loud by thousands of people, and that the healing of one mother was about to heal many others. That night, Emily sat beside Noah's bed, with the soft light of the bedside lamp illuminating the room. The boy slept peacefully, his face serene, breathing steady. Next to him, on the nightstand, the bracelet embroidered with Psalm 30 seemed to shine faintly, as if now it was more than an ornament. It was a mark, a seal. Emily opened the Bible on her lap, carefully marked in the same place that had appeared before her so many times in recent days. And with a voice still fragile but firm, she read, "I will exalt you, Lord, For you lifted me out of the depths and did not let my enemies gloat over me. Lord my God, I called to you for help, and you healed me. You, Lord, brought me up from the realm of the dead. He spared me from going down to the pit. Sing the praises of the Lord, you, his faithful people. Praise his holy name, for his anger lasts only a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime. Weeping may stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning. She closed her eyes. It felt like every verse had been written for her, but not only for her. It was a code that applied to other pains, to other mothers, to other children, to all those who needed to remember that darkness has an expiration date, and that healing had already started moving even before the request was made. Emily didn't know who would see this video, who would hear this story, who would be sitting right now on the other side of the screen, maybe in a hospital room, on a bed, or in a dark bedroom trying to find answers. But she knew that Psalm 30 was still echoing, and because of that, she did something she had never done before. She recorded a prayer, and this prayer is for you who are listening now. Lord, my God, today I don't pray just as a daughter. I pray as a mother, as someone who once sat in silence on a hospital bench, as someone who had no more words, but still had a whisper of hope inside. Today, I pray for those who are afraid to hear the diagnosis, for those waiting on a test result that feels like it defines the future, for those watching someone they love slowly fade away and don't know what to do. Lord, if tears have an expiration date, let today be the end. If the illness has a name, let your name be greater. If the night has been long, bring the morning. Heal the body of the one who is sick, but also heal the soul of the one who is tired. Restore the spirit of the one who has no strength left to believe. And remind us, Lord, that even before my prayer, your love was already in motion. You healed me, and if you did it for me, you can do it for the one listening right now. Amen. Double quotes. Emily clicked send. The video went live on the channel she had created weeks before, without knowing exactly why. Now, it all made sense. She didn't want followers. She wanted other people to find what she had found. A voice in the silence. In the days that followed, the comments began to arrive, first shyly, then in waves. I cried from start to finish. This prayer found me in the hospital. My son was healed too. I wrote my mother's name here. Please, pray for her. I saw this psalm in a dream. And now, here it is again in this video. Emily read each comment like someone listening to echoes coming from a deep cave, where cries of pain were slowly turning into hymns of faith. It was as if Psalm 30 had been called to fulfill a new mission, not just for her, not just for Noah, but for all who had reached the edge of their strength, the edge of their faith. Each message felt like a dose of invisible medicine, a transfusion of comfort. Words typed by strangers became remedies, and every letter, every emoji, every amen felt like another heartbeat of God echoing through the screen. Something beautiful began to happen. People started writing their own notes, in the comments section, in letters they sent to Emily, in sticky notes they placed around their houses or hospital rooms. They would share the video and say, "This psalm is for you. God is already answering. The sorrow will pass." Helen had started a wave, a current of grace, but Emily now realized she was just a link in the chain, and the next link might be you. So now, I speak directly to you. If this story reached your heart, if you're living in your own waiting room right now, maybe surrounded by diagnosis papers, questions, silence, or unspoken prayers, then this video isn't just a testimony. It's a bridge, a light, a whisper of heaven meant for you. Write the name of someone you love in the comments. Maybe it's your child, your mother, your father, a friend, or maybe it's your own name. Let's turn this video into a hallway of healing, like the corridors Helen used to walk, like the hospital room where Emily whispered her prayers in silence, like the wall in Noah's room where Psalm 30 was written before anyone knew a miracle was on its way. And if you can share this video with someone who's suffering, someone who needs hope but doesn't know how to ask for it, because sometimes God responds first. The prayer comes next, and after that comes the testimony. If your sorrow is still lasting through this night, then let the morning begin now.